Now that we've mastered the snatch, now we're ready to add in some rotation, which is, again, what makes these movements so powerful. But just like all of them, we want to make sure we start from the most proximal to the most distal. So keeping it close to the body to getting further and further away from the body. So they'll keep it close to the body, how we're going to perform that, but still incorporate some rotation. The same way we did with the clean. We're going to add in that pivot just like we did with the Deadstart clean rotation, but now we're going to add in the snatch. So we're going to catch up a little bit higher and a little bit higher. So if you need to go down in weight, that's totally fine. It's all about the movement and what we're trying to accomplish with that movement rather than the end weight that we're using. So don't worry about the weight. Don't have your leave your ego at the door, and don't be a hero. That's what I was trying to say. All right, so we're going to start with that bell to the ground just like we did before on that Deadstart clean, that Deadstart rotational clean. So as I pull up now, I'm going to pull up. At this point now, we've already gotten that progress to no press. We know what the Deadstart snatch. We know how we get it to that top position. So now we're going to do that with the snatch. So as we come down, we're going to pull up, breathe in, and catch it in line with our body. So we don't want to catch it out to the side. Because there's that big distance it needs to travel, it tends to lend itself to opening up too far and thus getting the arm outside of vertical. So we want to pull up just right vertically up across the body to get into that overhead position. So from right here, driving through that opposite leg that's planted, fully planted on the ground, breathe in, bring it overhead, down to the rack, again, back down, around. So this is why we played around with those different catches and catching the bell from the different position in the beginning of the snatch session, because we want to be able to catch that bell from any direction and still maintain perfect form at the top, still stay connected at the top. Okay, so once we practice this, now we can start adding in a little bit more fluidity to this. So the way we're going to add some fluidity is we're going to add a rotational snatch. The same way that we did with the clean, but this time we are going to immediately go into the pivot. The pivot is what's going to allow us to create the runway to be able to maintain that structure, maintain that structural integrity of the shoulder, of our thoracic spine, of our back, and allow us to get all that range of motion to be able to swing that bell overhead. So we're going to start with the bell on the rack. We're going to cast it out across the body, across the midline, and then as it swings back across the midline, that's when we're going to pivot with it and catch it up at the top. Now, what I want you to feel here is two things. Number one, that rotational clean, that same way that we had that nice smooth drop, same rule applies. And then on the catch, as we pull up, we're keeping that bell tight to the body as we pull up and push and bring to that top position. So remember, we're not just swinging that bell out all willy-nilly. We want to keep it nice and close. And then the same mechanics, the same principles as when we were doing all those other positions still apply. We're just changing the slight direction of it. We're changing the footing of this. So we're going to rack the bell. We're going to come across the midline and then swing back across the midline. So we're not casting out, but we're straightening this arm, remember, because we want to build that momentum. We're going to cast it out and pull as we rotate. Back down. Cast it out. Pull as we rotate. Back down one more time. So we want to be wearing shoes or being on ground that we can very easily pivot on. If we can't pivot, we don't want to use these methods. We want to wait until we can, or we could just want to stay sagittal and then we can come back to this later. But it's very important that we're able to pivot as we do this, because that way we can get more energy from the ground and more energy into this rotation. Okay, let's do the other side. From here, we're going to pivot. Notice how I'm pivoting and rotating. Bringing it back up. Shoulders connected, lats engaged. Back up. Now, I'm not catching the other way, but we certainly can. Once we feel comfortable, we can come up and catch any direction we want. But to start off with, we're going to cross the midline and then recross the midline. So that way, it's very natural in that rotation to open up with that opposite hip, to drive through that glute and really get that bell overhead almost effortlessly. Because as we start to flow, we want it to feel as effortless as possible. I always want you to think, my goal for myself, and my goal for you is as you train to make every position, every movement, regardless of the weight, regardless of your workout, to look as effortless as possible. It is not going to feel effortless, but I want it to look as effortless because that means things are connected and everything is working together. So once I've got that, we've only been doing it from the rack position. The next progression is going to be just like that 360 snatch or 360 clean where we alternated hands and caught and went right back into the snatch position. Same idea. And again, this is just such a fun way to add in hand transitions and build just that overall strength and connection that you have with this bell and with the workout movements that you're doing. So we'll start from this position right here. We're going to come across the body from the outside, keep that momentum going, and snatch it up. Back down to the rack. We're going to go across the body from the outside in now, so the opposite direction. Keep that momentum going, and snatch it up. So remember, the pivoting is so important. Once that feels good, you feel comfortable with your shoulder connection, you feel comfortable with the bell you're using. This is in the beginning of the workout, so you're not fatigued. You can now start from the top. So as you come down, it's going to allow you to really play around with the momentum of the bell. And again, this is where the flow gets so powerful because now we're having to coordinate our bodies, our tension through that multitude of directions so that we stay connected. And guess what? That's going to allow you to be able to create energy, create force from different directions, from inopportune, uncomfortable positions, and also to be able to absorb and relocate load, in this case, the external load being the kettlebell, but in another case, it might be another person if you're a fighter. It might be a bat that you're swinging. It might be something else that you're going to use in real life. In this case, real life for me is a kettlebell. So we're going to come back around. So notice that pivot. I'm opened up, so I've cleared the path. I'm going to let that bell come around and back and forth. So 360 alternating snatches, but I'm always keeping my shoulder completely engaged. So even when I am in that swinging, seemingly fluid position, I'm still maintaining that tension. And this is where the fun really starts with the kettlebell. So now, sets of rotational snatches with a fairly light weight are really going to not only increase your work capacity, increase your strength, increase your overall connection, your grip strength. It's going to make you look cool. No, I'm just kidding. It's going to make you a better athlete, a better mover, and a more resilient, powerful person.